Hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. I want to recognize that I am a bit under the weather today and my voice isn't at its best. I appreciate your understanding as I share this important ICD-11 content with you. A warm welcome to session 2 of the ICD-11 web training. It is inspiring to see so many dedicated colleagues from across the Caribbean joining us again to master ICD-11. The topic today is the structure and taxonomy of the ICD classification. ICD-11 represents a modern evidence-based framework designed to capture more nuanced clinical concepts, support better patient care, improve public health surveillance, and enable richer data for research and policy decisions. It reflects advances in medicine, digital health, and international collaboration while remaining rooted in the familiar structure of the ICD that you have relied on for years. Over the course of this session and the series to come, we will dive deeper into other features, resources, and tools of ICD-11. ICD-11 Mortality Coding Web Training Series is a foundational, introductory resource to help you become familiar with ICD-11 concepts and terminology. It is not a substitute for a comprehensive formal ICD-11 training program. For full proficiency and certification, please pursue an in-depth in-person or formally structured course delivered by recognized ICD-11 training providers. Today with this session, we remind you that 2026 release of ICD-11 with refined clinical content, expanded extension codes, updated mortality rule base, and new data quality validation framework known as CodeEdit. Now there are more than 6.3 million searchable code combinations, and ICD-11 2026 supports 21 languages. Thank you for joining this important journey. Together we will unlock the power of ICD-11 to improve mortality reporting, support better patient outcomes, and strengthen health data worldwide. Let's begin with a high-level tour of what's new, what stays familiar, and how this transition will unfold in your daily coding practice. My name is Saman Gamage, and I am a medical doctor with a specialization in public health. I currently serve as a senior technical advisor on medical certification and ICD within the Bloomberg Data for Health initiative of the CDC Foundation, USA. Here is the expected outcome of this session. By the end of the session, students will be able to describe taxonomy, structure, and general features of ICD-11. Here is my lesson plan for today. I will start with the taxonomy and structure. I will repeat chapter structure today as well. Those who joined last time, you remember I discussed about the chapter structure, and this will be a reminder of chapter structure and code structure. Then we will talk about ICD-11 Foundation, multiple parenting, then ICD-11 code types and concepts. Taxonomy and structure. ICD is a global system for naming and classifying diseases and health problems. ICD has a hierarchical structure from chapters to specific conditions. Chapters group related kinds of health problems. Within chapters, there are blocks and then individual diagnoses. ICD's chapter and block structure have evolved over 150 years in 11 iterations of classification. The evolution of the ICD carefully balances the need for categories that match current knowledge and statistical comparability over space and time. A statistical classification allows for different levels of detail if it has a hierarchical structure and subdivisions. A statistical classification of diseases should retain the ability to identify specific disease entities and to allow the statistical presentation of data for broader groups. ICD is a variable axis classification. The structure has been developed as proposed by William Farr. William Farr is one of the major figures in the history of epidemiology, a British physician with an unusual knowledge of statistics. He proposed several groups: epidemic diseases, constitutional or general diseases, local diseases arranged by site, developmental diseases, and injuries. These groups remain in the chapters of ICD-11. ICD is rather practical than a theoretical classification. The classification is based on etiology, anatomical site, circumstances of onset, or other criteria. ICD-11 can combine several codes to describe a clinical condition to the desired level of detail. Let's move on to the chapter structure of ICD-11. I'll go through the chapters once again. I did it last time. Chapter 1, as usual, similar to ICD-10, it is about certain infectious or parasitic diseases. Chapter 2 covers neoplasms. Chapter 3 covers diseases of the blood or blood-forming organs. Chapter 4 is a new addition covering diseases of the immune system. Then chapter 5 covers endocrine, nutritional, or metabolic diseases. Then chapter 6, mental and behavioral disorders. Chapter 7 is a new addition to include sleep-wake disorders. Nervous system is chapter 8. Visual system is chapter 9, and chapter 10 is diseases of the ear or mastoid process. Chapter 11, circulatory system. Chapter 12, respiratory system. Chapter 13, digestive system. And diseases of the skin comes under chapter 14. And diseases of the musculoskeletal system or connective tissue comes under chapter 15. Chapter 16 is diseases of the genitourinary system. Chapter 17 is a new addition. Chapter 17 covers conditions related to sexual health, pregnancy, childbirth, or puerperium, perinatal conditions, then developmental anomalies. Chapter 21, symptoms, signs, or clinical findings not elsewhere classified. Chapter 22, injury, poisoning, or certain other consequences of external causes. External causes of morbidity and mortality classified under chapter 23. Factors influencing health status or contact with health services is chapter 24, and chapter 25 is for codes for special purposes. Then there are 3 new sections. Chapter 26, supplementary chapter, traditional medicine conditions, module 1. Then supplementary section for functioning assessment, and then there's another section to include extension codes. So these are newly added sections to ICD-11. As you know, chapter ICD-11 has 26 chapters and ICD-10 has 22 chapters. Talking more about ICD-11 chapters, ICD-11 comprises of 26 chapters, as I told you. The chapter numbering is in Arabic numbers and not in Roman numerals as in ICD-10. Those who have used ICD-10 may remember we numbered chapters in Roman, but in ICD-11, chapters are numbered in Arabic. Chapters 1 to 9, the first character of the codes is the chapter number. chapters 1 to 9. The first character of the codes is the chapter number 1 to 9. Chapters 10 to 26. The first character of the codes is an English letter from A to S, but there are two exceptions, I and O. Letter I and letter O are not used in ICD-11. X is the first character in extension codes. Now here are the chapters. There are 26 chapters. For the first 9 chapters, chapters 1 to 9, the first character of the codes is chapter number. But from the chapters 10 to 26, for the chapters 10 to 26, the first character is an English letter except I and O. Letter A to letter S, two exceptions, I and O. Letter X is the first character in extension codes. And as I told you before, I and O have been removed, and we do not use these two letters for the simple reason I can be confused with 1 and O can be confused with 0. So we had this issue with ICD-10. Talking more about code characters, extension codes start with letter X. The first character in extension codes is X. Then Y is reserved for other specified categories. We will come to that later. Y is reserved for other specified categories, and Z is reserved for the residual category unspecified. Other specified is indicated by Y, but it's not the first character. Then unspecified categories. The residual category unspecified is indicated by Z. Talking more about new chapters, as you know, ICD-10 chapter 3 is for diseases of the blood and blood-forming organs and certain disorders involving the immune mechanism. Chapter 3 is split into two. In ICD-11, we have two chapters. Chapter 3, diseases of the blood or blood-forming organs. Chapter 4, diseases of the immune system. In ICD-10, Chapter 5 is for mental and behavioral disorders. In ICD-11, Chapter 6 covers mental, behavioral, or neurodevelopmental disorders, and Chapter 7 covers sleep-wake disorders. ICD-10 Chapter 14, diseases of the genitourinary system. In ICD-11, Chapter 16 is for diseases of the genitourinary system. Chapter 17 is for conditions related to sexual health. Talking about the code structure, let me remind you about ICD-10 code structure. Codes are alphanumeric. This means ICD-10 codes comprise of alpha characters, English letters, and Arabic numbers. Range from A00 to Z99. Minimum 3 characters and maximum 5 characters. That is 2 levels of subcategories. Always a letter in the first position. The letter U was not used originally. Initially it was not used, but later it was added in chapter 22, subsequently assigned for codes for special purposes. Example, for COVID-19 and SARS, severe acute respiratory syndrome. So here is an example. ICD-11 code structure. ICD-11 uses alphanumeric codes for flexibility and easy expansion and supports a greater number of codes and combinations. Similar to ICD-10, codes are alphanumeric. range from 1A00.00 to ZZ9Z.ZZ, minimum 4 characters and maximum 6 characters. Always a letter in the second position to distinguish from the codes of ICD-10. In ICD-11 codes, letter in the second position to distinguish from codes of ICD-10. As you know, ICD-10 codes have a letter in the first position. ICD-11 codes have letter in the second position. As I told you before, the letters O and I are omitted to prevent confusion with the numbers 0 and 1. The first character of the code always relates to the chapter number 1 to S. Forced number at the third character to prevent spelling undesirable words. For example, at the third character position, there is always a number. So here is an example, old myocardial infarction, BA50. At the third character position, there is a number to prevent pronouncing or spelling undesirable words. Here is the code structure once again. First character is the chapter indicator. Second character is an alpha character, English letter, to differentiate from ICD-10 codes. Third character is always a number to avoid the pronunciation of undesirable words. Minimum 4 characters and maximum 6 characters. So this is about chapter structure and code structure. Let's go into other details of ICD-11. Let's talk about ICD-11 Foundation. What is Foundation? The Foundation provides a single comprehensive structure that covers a wide range of health issues from injuries to illnesses to health conditions. The foundation component of ICD-11 represents entities like diseases, disorders, injuries, illnesses, health conditions, and so on. In other words, foundation represents the entire ICD-11 universe. All the conditions, all injuries, all diseases, all health problems, all health conditions categorized under ICD-11 are found in the foundation. The foundation is a multi-dimensional collection of tens of thousands of interconnected entities called classes or nodes. As you know, ICD-11 is digital in structure. Every node of the foundation has a unique entity ID known as URI or Uniform Resource Identifier, which is a unique web address for every entity. As you all can see on this slide, there is a web address or URI, Uniform Resource Identifier. So this is a URI or unique identity for a specific node within the foundation of ICD-11. A node can have multiple child and parent nodes. So it's a complex, intricate network of conditions. Let's talk more about foundation and URI. Every entity in the foundation has a URI. As I told you before, URI is a Uniform Resource Identifier, URI. It's something like a web address. Only the most common or important terms are given ICD-11 codes. This means not all URI are having ICD-11 codes. Only the most common or important terms are given ICD-11 codes. These form the ICD classification or linearization. The rest have only URI with no code, appear as index terms under the categories to which they are classified and take their codes. I'll repeat this. Every entity in the ICD-11 Foundation has a URI. Only the most common or important terms are given ICD-11 codes, and they form the ICD classification or linearization. The rest have only URI with no code. However, these URI without codes appear as index terms under the categories to which they are classified and take their codes. So they will appear as index terms under other categories having ICD-11 codes. Let me explain this again. I think you are aware of Google Maps. In Google Maps, each location has a unique identity, the longitude and latitude. So this is a Google map of a district in Sri Lanka, Kandy. Here you find the longitude and latitude. Kandy is a beautiful city in the central part of Sri Lanka. Similarly, in the ICD Foundation, there are specific locations for each disease entity, similar to locations in a Google map. You have specific locations, longitude and latitude, and in ICD Foundation, there are specific locations for each disease entity with specific entity address or URI. So here is an example. ICD-11 code GB 20.0 represents fibrocystic change of breast, GB 20.0. However, there are other conditions of the breast, fibrosclerosis of breast, chronic cystic breast, chronic mastitis, chronic cystic mastitis, cystic dysplasia of breast, then cystic hypertrophy of breast, and all these conditions share the same ICD-11 code GB 20.0, which is specific for the fibrocystic change of breast. In other words, these are index terms under GB 20.0, but these conditions have different URIs. As you all can see in this screen, fibrosclerosis of breast, the code is GB 20.0, but there is a specific entity address or uniform resource identifier. Chronic cystic breast, the same ICD-11 code, but a specific entity address. Chronic mastitis, chronic cystic mastitis share the same code, dysplasia of breast, cystic hypertrophy of breast, the same code, GB 20.0. In other words, these are index terms under fibrocystic change of breast. However, you can see they have different unique entity addresses. These are uniform resource identifiers. So in the ICD-11 Foundation, these entities have specific locations. They have specific locations, but they don't have specific codes. They all share the common code GB 20.0, and these conditions are listed as index terms under the fibrocystic change of breast, GB 20.0. Here is another example. GA00.0 is the code for acute vulvitis, but there is an index term under acute valvitis, GA00.0, valval cellulitis. And not only valval cellulitis, there are other index terms: acute valvitis, allergic valvitis, atrophic valvitis, inflammation of labium, labial infection, valval cellulitis, valval infection. All these index terms share the same ICD-11 code, GA00.0. As you can see, GA00.0 acute valvitis has a unique URI, foundation URI, http id who.int ICD entity 189842827. But valval cellulitis is an index term under acute valvitis, or GA00.0, but it has a specific URI. 536416431 is a different one. So they have unique locations within the ICD-11 foundation. Here is another example. Abscess of liver. ICD-11 code is DB90.0. This is the URI, unique resource, uniform resource identifier. Now, only amoebic liver abscess has its code. Amoebic liver abscess has 1A36.10, but all the other types of liver abscesses share the same ICD codes DB90.0, but they have different URI. Periportal abscess, hepatic abscess, capillariasis due to capillaria hepatica, bacterial liver abscess, cholangitic liver abscess. They all share the same ICD-11 code DB90.0, but they have unique resource identifiers. I hope URI is the concept of URI and the foundation is clear to all of you. The foundation is a huge database of health conditions and medical terms. Each disease entity has a unique identifier in the foundation, unique identifier, URI. Not all foundation entities have ICD-11 codes in the classification, but all of them have URI in the foundation. The URI remains attached to its entity, so it doesn't change when ICD-11 is updated or translated. As you know, ICD-11 is updated annually. The most recent update was 2026 update, was released in February. In each year, February, there will be some updates to ICD-11. But with these updates, URI will not change. URI will be the same. Even though there are updates, URI will remain attached to its entity, and it doesn't change when ICD-11 is updated or translated. Therefore, a unique resource identifier is a string of characters that uniquely identifies or points to a resource, a specific ICD-11 entity on the internet, the entity's specific place in the WHO foundation. URI attached to an entity is permanent and it will never change. It is permanent. So you may translate ICD-11 into other languages. It is already available in 21 languages, but URI will be the same. So uniform resource identifier is a unique sequence of characters, means of locating and retrieving information resources on a network. May not be meaningful to a human at a glance because it's a complex address identifier. However, computers need them for interoperability, data exchange, and consistent meaning. I think I have explained enough about URI, but I will show you a very short 2-minute video clip about ICD-11 URI, and this video is done by Islam Ibrahim from Kuwait Center. She is now attached to University of New South Wales. Just listen to this short video.
ICD-11 is more than a classification for reporting and statistics. It is also a digitally native terminology. At its core, ICD-11 is built from discrete components called entities. Each entity represents a unique clinical concept and is identified by a Uniform Resource Identifier, or URI, that is a stable, globally unique identifier designed for use by digital systems. Each entity is classified to an ICD-11 code in the ICD-11 classification. URIs may not be meaningful to humans at a glance, but they are exactly what computers need for reliable interoperability, data exchange, and consistent meaning across systems. This is where ICD-11's terminology capabilities become especially powerful. A single ICD-11 code can group multiple clinically distinct entities for statistical purposes, while the URIs keep the precise clinical meaning. Urban yellow fever and jungle yellow fever differ in transmission. They are two distinct clinical concepts. Although both are reported under the same ICD-11 code for statistical purposes, ICD-11 terminology provides a separate URI for each one, and that means each one of them has its own unique identifier. In electronic medical records, this means you can accurately capture and exchange clinical level detail without losing meaning. The approach supports consistent aggregation, analytics, and reporting. URIs are stable identifiers. They remain valid even after an entity is retired, translated to another language, or if the ICD-11 code it is classified to changes during a major revision of the ICD-11 classification. This preserves the integrity of historical data and ensures comprehensive longitudinal records. If you want to know more about URIs, watch this.
Yeah, that's about URI. Let's talk about ICD linearization. In ICD-11, linearization is the process of converting the multi-level web-like ICD-11 foundation into a practical, user-friendly list of tabular list that clinicians and coders and researchers can use for everyday tasks. Think of it as creating a structured step-by-step table of contents from the full flexible framework so you can reliably find code and report conditions. A linearization is a subset of the foundation component fit for a particular purpose, reporting mortality, morbidity, or other uses. Jointly exhaustive of ICD universe foundation component, that is, the union of the categories equals the entire space of ICD concepts, composed of entities that are mutually exclusive of each other. So linearization is similar to the classical print versions of the ICD tabular list. For example, in ICD-10 tabular list, volume 1 of ICD-10 or other previous editions. Rare diseases. Data on rare diseases remain preserved when captured by ICD-11 coding tool. Many rare diseases do not have their own ICD-11 codes. However, every one of them has its own URI. For example, Sack-Barabas syndrome is a rare disease. There are 39 index terms under the code LD28.1Y, as you all can see here. But Sack-Barabas syndrome is one of those, and it is a rare disease, and it has a specific URI. And whenever you search this in the coding tool, which we learn in a future session, you will be able to find this condition, and it will remain as same within the ICD Foundation with a unique location within the foundation. Let's discuss about parent-child relationships. This is another concept we discussed with ICD-11. In ICD-11, conditions are organized in a hierarchical structure. Each concept, that means a disease, symptom, or health issue, can have one or more broader categories it belongs to. The hierarchical structure grouping similar entities together. Parent is a broader category or grouping under which one or more related concepts, that is, children, reside. Child is a more specific concept that falls under broader parent category. So parents are in the top level of hierarchy. Children and siblings provide more granularity. Entities are known as siblings when they are co-located under one parent, and all entities under a parent are considered siblings. Let's go through this example. Now we have the parent category mycosis. Here is the parent. And then under mycosis, you have cryptococcosis 1F27. It's a child. Then there are siblings. Pulmonary cryptococcosis, disseminated cryptococcosis, other specified cryptococcosis, they are all siblings. So you have the parents, then children, and siblings. There's another concept that we discuss under with ICD-11 is multiple parenting. Occurs when a foundational entity is correctly classifiable in more than one place within ICD-11. So some health concepts fit neatly under more than one umbrella. For example, a condition might be both a disorder of a body system and a manifestation of a more general health issue. ICD-11 allows a single concept to have more than one parent category. This means the same concept can appear in multiple parts of the classification tree. So when one entity has one or more parents in the ICD-11, it is displayed in multiple locations with emphasis on its primary parent. A single ICD-11 entity, the term you code, is linked to multiple parent headings. For example, a condition might be linked under both a family of disorders and a specific organ system category. So where the entity under the secondary parent is displayed in gray. Let's look at this example. An example for multiple parenting. So primary parent is neoplasms. Under this primary parent, we have child category, malignant neoplasms of breast. Malignant neoplasms of breast. Okay. Now here you can find a secondary parent for malignant neoplasm of breast because it is also categorized under chapter 16, diseases of the genitourinary system. And here is the child category, malignant neoplasms of breast. But as you can see, malignant neoplasms of breast is appearing gray because it is in gray color, because it is indicated, it is listed under secondary parent. While primary parent appears here, primary parent is neoplasm because, as you know, malignant neoplasm of breast is a neoplasm. The primary parent is neoplasms, but it is also categorized or listed under a secondary parent diseases of the genitourinary system. So this concept is known as multiple parenting. You have primary parent as well as a secondary parent. ICD-11 has a hierarchical structure in the browser. So we will learn about ICD-11 browser in the next video, in the next web training session. So here we have chapter 15, diseases of the musculoskeletal system. Then there are different levels of hierarchy. So if you go down, you have arthropathies, and you can go further down, infection-related arthropathies, and if you go further down, FA 10.2, fungal infection of joint. So this is the hierarchical structure of the classification, ICD classification. This is called hierarchy. Then there is another concept called block codes. Higher level entities in ICD-11 may be used for reporting aggregated statistics. They are called blocks. However, blocks do not have category codes as they are not supposed to be used in coding. Blocks have their own URIs. Example, the URI for neoplasms is this. Okay, let's discuss about some other ICD-11 code types and concepts. With ICD-11, we discuss about stem codes. Another concept is pre-coordination. There's another concept called extension codes. Post-coordination is another concept, and cluster coding. So we talk about, maybe you have already come across these terms: stem codes, pre-coordination, extension codes, post-coordination, cluster coding. Let's discuss these code types and concepts one by one. Stem code. Stem codes are the codes that can be used alone. They are found in the tabular list, and they are the entities of groupings of high relevance, highly relevant conditions. The conditions having more relevance, they are represented by stem codes. And these are the clinical conditions that should always be described as one category. The design makes sure that in use cases that require only one code per case. This is an example, Hutchison-Gilford syndrome. In the coding tool, in the search window, we have entered Hutchison-Gilford syndrome, and we have the code LD2B, the code for Hutchison-Gilford syndrome, and this is a stem code representing a condition having high relevance, and the sole code for Hutchison-Gilford syndrome is LD2B, and it is indicated by a blue highlighted stem code, which we will discuss in a later presentation. So these are stem codes. What do we mean by pre-coordination? Stem codes may contain all pertinent information about a clinical concept in a pre-combined fashion. Any information embedded within a stem code are pre-combined. All clinical concepts, all information are available in a pre-combined fashion, and this is referred to as pre-coordination. Pre-coordination. Already the clinical concept is combined together. For example, BD50.40 is the code for abdominal aortic aneurysm with perforation, and this is a pre-coordinated stem code. Aneurysm is coded, aortic aneurysm is coded, abdominal aortic aneurysm, the information is combined within, and this has a perforation as well. So all these pertinent information are combined in a pre-combined fashion. So this is called pre-coordination. Another example, CA40.04, pneumonia due to Mycoplasma pneumoniae. As you know, we know this is a case of pneumonia, and the organism is also, the information about the organism is also available, Mycoplasma pneumoniae. So the ICD-11 code CA40.04 includes or contain the information that this is a pneumonia caused by Mycoplasma pneumoniae. So this is a pre-coordinated stem code. Let's talk about extension codes. Extension codes are the standard way additional information is added to a stem code. Extension codes can never be used without a stem code. So this is something important. You cannot use extension codes alone. Always an extension code will be combined with a stem code. And they will never appear in the first position in a code cluster. So if you have a cluster of codes or several codes together, extension code will not appear at the first position, right? It will be at the second or maybe third or fourth position. It will never appear in the first position in a cluster. An extension code start with X. The first character in an extension code is X. This is an example. Testicular seminoma right. Testicular seminoma right. The code is 2C80.7 and XK9K. XK9K is an extension code which comes after the stem code. 2C80.7 is a stem code, and extension code comes after the stem code. And these two codes are combined by a symbol, or this is called a convention, ampersand. And XK9K indicates the laterality, because this is right-sided testicular seminoma. So XK9K indicates right. So this is an example stem code. There are two types of extension codes. Type 1 extension codes adding detail on an entity or disease coded from ICD-11 chapters 1 to 26. Type 1 extension codes. Then there are type 2 extension codes that can qualify a diagnosis and can be applied to codes from any chapter. Type 1 extension codes comprise of groups of the extension codes comprise of groups of codes. So type 1 extension codes may specify anatomy, an agent, infective agent, histopathology, laterality, etc. So type 1 extension codes are used to indicate these concepts or these information. Type 2 extension codes may show discharge diagnosis types, especially useful in morbidity coding to indicate a main condition, main resource condition, initial reason for encounter or admission, diagnosis timing. If a condition was present on admission, that can be indicated by using an extension code. Or if another condition was developed after admission, to indicate that, we can use an extension code, a type 2 extension code. Or uncertain timing of onset relative to admission. So these are type 2, some examples of type 2 extension codes. Diagnosis timing in relation to surgical procedure, diagnosis method of confirmation, diagnosis certainty, obstetrical diagnosis timing, encounter descriptors, And these extension codes are mostly useful in morbidity coding. So here is another example, cancer right breast. Cancer right breast, the code combination is 2C6Z and XK9K. XK9K indicate the laterality. So the stem code is combined with an extension code, and we use ampersand, the convention for the combination. And XK9K is the extension code indicating the laterality or right side, right breast. So the facts to remember are extension codes never used alone without a stem code. You cannot use them alone. Can never appear in the first position of a cluster. Always start with the letter X. Never used alone without a stem code. Will never appear in the first position of a cluster and always start with the letter X. The other concept we want to discuss is post-coordination. Post-coordination refers to linking multiple codes together to fully describe a documented clinical concept. Now, we earlier discussed about pre-coordination. So in a STEM code, additional or several clinical concepts may be combined together in a pre-combined fashion. This is called pre-coordination. But in post-coordination, you will link multiple codes together to fully describe a documented clinical concept. For example, a STEM code will be combined with another STEM code, or STEM code will be combined with an extension code. STEM code will be combined with an STEM code and an extension code. So there are different combinations, STEM code, STEM code, STEM code, extension code, STEM code, extension codes. There are different types of combinations. So this is called post-coordination. You keep on combine codes together until you fully describe a documented clinical diagnosis or a clinical concept. So here is another example, adenocarcinoma of right bronchus, and two codes are combined, a stem code and an extension code. So this is post-coordination. So when you combine a stem code with an extension code, you use the symbol ampersand. This is the standard symbol that you will use before the extension code when you combine this as a stem code. However, if you combine a stem code with another stem code, the convention used is ampersand. A convention used either forward slash or ampersand to show more than one code used together. For example, stem code to a stem code, a forward slash, but stem code combining with extension codes, ampersand. Let's look at this diagnosis. Duodenal ulcer with acute hemorrhage. Code cluster is DA63.Z forward slash ME24.90. DA63.Z is the code for duodenal ulcer unspecified. And this duodenal ulcer has manifestation, hemorrhage. Therefore, we use an additional code to indicate hemorrhage. The code is ME24.90, acute gastrointestinal bleeding not elsewhere classified. So we combine the two codes together to indicate duodenal ulcer unspecified and acute gastrointestinal bleeding not elsewhere classified. So here are the codes in the cluster DA63.Z forward slash ME24.90 to indicate the manifestation. So here is the code cluster. Stem code with another stem code. Duodenal ulcer with acute hemorrhage is indicated by two stem codes, and this is a cluster of codes. I hope this concept is clear to all of you. In ICD-11 cluster coding, / is a separator between stem codes. Two stem codes are combined by a / This is the separator. Ampersand is a separator between stem codes with one or more extension codes. In a medical certificate of cause of death, vertical bar is a separator between lines in part 1 of the medical certificate of cause of death. In part 1, the separator between lines, vertical bar. An asterisk is a separator between part 1 and part 2 of medical certificate of cause of death. In mortality coding, probably we will use these separators or symbols. So here is an example in the medical certificate of cause of death, 1A BD10, 1B BD5Z, and in part 2 there are two conditions, BA511 / 9B71.0Z. So in this cluster, this is how it is indicated. Vertical bar expresses the separator between lines in part 1. Asterisk expresses the separator between part 1 and part 2. / shows the cluster as a separator between stem following the convention of ICD. So the two stem codes are combined with a /. There are other general features. ICD-11 categories have short and long descriptions labeled additional information. The short description in ICD-11, short description is a maximum of 100 words. Short description is information about a disease or condition and necessary to understand the scope of the rubric. The long additional information is the full description without length restriction. Special tabulation lists are available. They continue to exist in ICD-11. And there are 3 additional lists as well. You remember, if you are familiar with ICD-10, we have special tabulation lists for morbidity and mortality. Similarly, in ICD-11, there are special tabulation lists for morbidity and mortality for reporting purposes. And then there are additional lists, the startup mortality list, and the list for verbal autopsy, and the list of infectious diseases by agent. All right, today we wanted to discuss with you all about the structure and taxonomy of the classification. I hope the concept that we discussed, we started with the discussion about taxonomy and structure, then we discussed about the chapter structure, and then we covered the code structure. Then we talked about ICD-11 Foundation, URI, index terms. URI are uniform resource identifiers indicating the specific locations of conditions within the ICD-11 Foundation. And then we discussed about parent and child categories, multiple parenting, then hierarchical structure, then some concepts, stem code, extension code, pre-coordination, post-coordination, code cluster. Right. Before we end, we will do a few exercises as we did last time. And I will display the exercises on the screen. And if you like, you can send your responses in the chat. So this is exercise 1. Please state whether the following statements about stem codes are true or false. A. stem codes are the codes that can be used alone. Is it true or false? That is true. Stem codes are the codes that can be used alone. Very good. They are assigned to the disease entities of high relevance. Stem codes are assigned to the disease entities of high relevance. Is it true or false? True. I told you stem codes cover the entities of high relevance. Stem codes represent the conditions described as one category. Yeah, that is also true. Correct. D, they are always connected with extension codes. Is this true or false? Stem codes, are they always connected with extension codes? No, that's not correct. It is false. Okay. E, they are found in the tabular list of ICD-11. Yeah, that is true. Stem codes are found in the tabular list of ICD-11. That's correct. Let's move on to exercise 2. Please state whether the following statements about extension codes are true or false. Extension codes are never used alone without a stem code. Is this true? Yes, it is true. Thank you very much for your responses. Extension codes can appear in the first position of a cluster. This is not correct because extension codes they will never appear in the first position of a cluster. C, they start with letter X. That's true. It is true. The first character of an extension code is X. Type 1 extension codes are used to add details of severity, temporality, etiology, etc. to stem codes. Yeah, this is also correct. I explained to you about the types of extension codes. There are type 1 extension code and type 2 extension codes. E, they are not used as the last code in a string. Now, this is false. Extension codes can be used as a last code in a string. They will never be used as a first condition or first code in a cluster, but in subsequent positions they can appear. This exercise has another part. What extension code indicates a right side in laterality? So right side is indicated by the extension code XK9K. XK9K. Exercise 3. What is pre-coordination? What do you mean by pre-coordination? The response is stem codes may contain all pertinent information about a clinical concept in a pre-combined fashion. This is referred to as pre-coordination. Stem codes contain all required information about a clinical concept in a pre-combined fashion, and it is referred to as pre-coordination. What is meant by post-coordination? Post-coordination refers to linking multiple codes together to describe documented clinical concept fully. To fully describe the clinical concept, you link multiple codes together, and this is called post-coordination. Exercise number 5. What is the convention used to combine a stem code with another stem code? The convention is /. This is the separator used to combine two codes, stem code with another stem code. What convention combines a stem code with an extension code? This is ampersand. Stem code with another stem with an extension codes. The separator is ampersand, or the convention used to combine is ampersand. Okay, we have done 5 exercises and we have come to the end of this session. The next session will be on ICD-11 tool in environment next month. And thank you very much for your attention. But if you have any questions, so this is the time to ask questions. And I saw one question in the chat, and the question is about the recording. As I know, this presentation is recorded by PAHO, and the recording will be available. I think it is recorded, so probably you will receive a recording if you require the recording of the presentation. But if you have any other questions, you can just unmute yourself and ask a question, or if not, please send your questions in the chat. Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. Any questions? Yeah, there is a comment by Sandra Cotton. Yes, we'll be able to meet for hands-on rather than only video. Yeah, sure. In future sessions, we will have some hands-on experience, coding examples. Next will be on ICD-11 tool in environment and browser, and the following which we will do the ICD-11 coding tool. And after that, we will have a session on coding examples where you will be given the opportunity to practice. Yeah, there is a question by Angela. Sorry if I am pronouncing your names incorrect. Please bear with me. If you need to report on morbidity, do you separate the codes the same way as you demonstrated in mortality? The forward slash and ampersand will be the same, whether it is for morbidity coding or mortality coding. But I showed you some vertical bar and asterisk, and they are used to indicate. So those are actually for mortality, because if you write down the code cluster in a death certificate, we will use this vertical bar and asterisk, but we will not use them in morbidity because there's no such necessity. Anyway, the ampersand and forward slash are the standard symbols for both morbidity and mortality. Then there's another question, is there a specific order to use the extension code? So this is a common question. Yeah, you can combine multiple extension codes together. So depending on the relevance or depending on how the diagnosis is recorded, you can use extension codes. Sometimes it is possible that you will use more than one extension code, for example, to indicate the laterality. And sometimes if you are coding for an accident or external cause, then there are a number of extension codes that you can use. There's no specific order, but maybe based on how the information is available in the diagnosis. How will these long code hold on death records? So it is, the name is not there, anonymous attendee, but yeah, even in a death record, you can use these codes in mortality coding after applying mortality coding rules. The stem codes, the stem code will be the most important, but all these codes will be, for example, if you use the DORIS, automated mortality coding system for mortality coding, so DORIS will select the underlying cause of death, and there's another system, IRIS, and sometimes the underlying cause of death code will have a stem code and another extension code or another stem code. Yeah. Will a copy of the session be shared with us? Not the PowerPoint, but you will it will be possible to receive the recording. For example, type 1 first and then type 2. This is about extension codes. Yeah, type 2 extension codes mostly you will use in morbidity. Yeah, type 1 extension code will be the first ones to use because that specifies the severity, laterality, histopathology, and so on. But type 2 extension codes are discharge types and other indications, so they will come subsequently. Will this PowerPoint be available? Unfortunately, PowerPoint will not be available, but we will have the recording. External course codes are the same as deceased codes. I think the question may be about underlying cause of death code. Yeah. For example, if the death is caused by an accident or violence, the circumstances of the accident or violence will become the underlying cause of death. So that's the WHO definition. By definition, it is the circumstances that will become the underlying cause of death. Yeah, then the external cause code will be the underlying cause of death in case of accidents and violence. Okay, thank you so much. Someone say hi from Mexico. Hi, yeah. Can we have a copy of the presentation? Unfortunately, we do not share the presentation, but you will receive the recording. Thank you very much. And I really enjoyed your questions and talking to you. And see you again um, in a month's time. I think PAHO had shared the schedule for the meetings. There's another comment, surgical procedures are posing problems to code. Yeah, we will discuss such examples in future sessions, and we are going to discuss mortality coding rules, and all these issues can be discussed in future sessions. I really appreciate the training, very informative. Thank you, Maria. Yeah, thank you very much for your comment. Right. Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon. Yeah. It's actually evening in my part of the world. It's almost 9 o'clock in the evening, 9 p.m. right by now. Right. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think if you have no more questions, we can wind up now. This is my email address, so if you have any questions, you can email me. And in future sessions, yeah, there is time difference. Yeah, I think this is the most convenient. I think this is a convenient time for you all. 10 o'clock in the morning is convenient time for you all. Right. Thank you very much. And I'll stop sharing my screen. So we'll see you again in a month's time with another session. And probably it will be the ICD-11 tool in environment, ICD-11 browser.